Have you ever wondered what happens when you put good people in a really bad place? I mean, what if you gave totally ordinary people absolute power over someone else? Well, back in 1971, a psychological study tried to answer exactly that. And wow, the results were so shocking, so controversial, they still make us talk today. Let's dive into what happened. So, this is the story in a nutshell. It all started with 24 completely normal college students, a fake prison they built in a university basement, and it all fell apart into total chaos in less than a week. The real question is, how did things go so wrong so incredibly fast? All right, to really get a grip on the chaos, we have to rewind to the beginning. You know, this wasn't just some random prank. This was a formal psychological study that kicked off in the summer of '71 at Stanford University, and it was led by a professor named Philip Zimbardo. And this is super important, who they picked for this. The researchers were really careful to find participants who were psychologically stable. These weren't troublemakers or anything like that. They were just healthy, ordinary young guys who signed up for what they thought would be a simple 2-week study. They were, for all intents and purposes, the definition of normal. So you might be asking, why go through all this trouble? I mean, what were the researchers actually hoping to learn by building a whole prison in a basement? Well, the big question was all about power and your environment. Zimbardo and his team, they wanted to see what happens when you take away someone's identity and just give them a new one, like guard or prisoner. Would the real person shine through, or would the power of the situation, the role they were playing, just completely take over? And here's the real kicker, the most critical part of this whole setup. How did they decide who was a guard and who was a prisoner? It wasn't based on personality. Nope. It was totally random. A simple flip of a coin decided whether a student would get all the power or none at all. Their fate was literally left to chance. And you can see right away how this power imbalance was baked in from the very first minute. The guards, they got all the symbols of authority, military-style uniforms, billy clubs, even reflective sunglasses to make them anonymous and intimidating. The prisoners, though, they were systematically stripped of everything that made them them. They had to wear these rough smocks with no underwear, they were only called by a number, and they were locked away in tiny, empty cells. The stage was absolutely set. So, with the roles assigned and the scene set, the experiment began. And almost immediately, things started to go off the rails with terrifying speed. On day one, the guards were kind of awkward, not really sure how to act. But by day 2, everything changed. The prisoners rebelled, and the guards hit back hard, with psychological warfare, spraying them with fire extinguishers, taking away their beds. By day 3, the transformation was just complete. The guards were making prisoners do push-ups as punishment, using humiliation to control them. And the prisoners, they became broken, passive, and just deeply distressed. And listen, that's not me exaggerating for effect. That's a direct observation from the researchers themselves. In just a few days, these totally ordinary students had completely become their roles. The guards turned cruel, and the prisoners were showing signs of a full-on psychological breakdown. The whole situation had spiraled so far out of control, it was a total ethical nightmare. The experiment had become way too real, and the researchers, they had a huge decision to make. Just 6 days. That's it. That's all it took for this 2-week study to become a full-blown crisis. Now think about that for a second. It was supposed to go on for 14 days. The psychological damage was so bad, the behavior was so extreme, they had to pull the plug 8 days early. You have to wonder what on earth happened in those 6 days to force their hand. Well, they stopped it because the cruelty wasn't just getting worse, it was becoming truly sadistic. And the prisoners weren't just unhappy, they were having serious emotional breakdowns. For everyone involved, the line between an experiment and actual reality had just vanished. Zimbardo even admitted he got so caught up in his role as the prison superintendent that he lost his objective view as a scientist. And that blurring of the lines, that's one of the biggest criticisms of the experiment today. So, after all that chaos, what did we learn? What was the big takeaway? Well, the conclusion Zimbardo came to is incredibly powerful, but it's also one of the most debated ideas in psychology. It all boils down to this idea called situational influence. Basically, the theory is that your environment, the situation you're put in, and the role you're told to play can actually be more powerful in shaping your behavior than your own personality, your morals, your whole sense of who you are. And that was the scary lesson Zimbardo put forward, that situations can literally turn good people evil. But, and this is a big but, critics now point to some major flaws. They argue that the guards weren't just coming up with this stuff on their own. There's evidence they were actually encouraged to be tough. The participants might have just been playing the part they thought the scientists wanted to see. So this suggests it wasn't just the situation, but maybe the experiment's own design that led to those horrifying results. And that leaves us with a really unsettling question to think about. I think we all like to believe we'd be the hero, right? The person who stands up and says no. But this experiment, for all its flaws, it really forces us to ask ourselves, if you were put in that situation, given a role, and you thought you knew what was expected of you, how far would you go? Who would you really become?